Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now today I have my wand out, and yes, this is a wand which I made while I was camping that's a couple of years ago now actually. There's small little details here and there, but basically I was bored, whittled down a wand, and now this is my wand. If I was in a Harry Potter story, this would be my wand. I've got my wand out because I want to talk to you today about my experience and how much I loved the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them movie. In fact, I want to give you today my top 5 reasons as to why this may well be the best of the Potter films. Now, I'm saying Potter films because obviously this story is in the same universe as Harry Potter. Obviously, this story is not to do with Harry Potter, and that's, I think, is one of its strengths. And I shall, I suppose, start with that. Actually, the fact that this point number one is the fact that this story, this whole film, is not based on one of the books. This is a strength because it means that we're not comparing it to anything when we go into the movie. We're not going, oh, that didn't happen in the book, or in the book this didn't. Instead, we're actually taking it at face value, and that I imagine probably is very liberating for the filmmakers. David Yates, as the director, must have found this very liberating to actually be able to put and expand on, I suppose, the stamp that he was able to put on the latter of the Harry Potter films. In a way which is much more creatively cohesive. He's not having to serve two masters. They have a script, and the script is where they're going, taking their lead from when it comes to the story. And in that sense, I love the fact that in this film there isn't a chosen one. We're not dealing with a Star Wars or a Harry Potter type situation where there is one person who's bound to save the day. Now, I know, strictly speaking, in Harry Potter lore, actually Neville Longbottom could have been Harry Potter. It's just that Voldemort fixates on Potter himself. But nonetheless, the point is that there's this sort of prophecy, isn't there? And Potter is sort of involved in that. And in this film, that's not what's going on. We're not dealing with a chosen one scenario. So the fact that there's no known or absolute narrative that we have to follow in this story is I think, a really great strength. Especially as also the fact that this is a story which is surrounding what was essentially an in-passing publication. The Fantastic Beasts book, which I do have upstairs with my Harry Potter books, was published as a charity exercise for the Red Nose Day, I think, campaign. So it's a very thin little book, and it's got really nothing to do with the film. So I think that's a great positive for this being possibly the best of the movies. Next, we have Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander. I think that's the next big positive for this film, and in this series of films, which has been confirmed as an upcoming 5-movie series. Eddie Redmayne is magnificent. From the first shot in this film, you get a very strong sense of Newt's character, but also that there's a certain physicality to him. He is clearly a man who is not at ease with people. He's a man who's far more comfortable with animals, and that fits beautifully with the Newt character, but also reflects very much the research that Eddie Redmayne did into animal handlers. He hung around with people who do routinely deal with animals. He noticed little details like you don't really make eye contact with an animal if you're trying to befriend it, and he struggles to maintain eye contact with people throughout the movie. The way he walks, his concerns when it comes to the welfare of animals, but also actually his observations about, for example, the differences between American and UK society, especially Wizarding society, are superb. Newt as a character and Eddie Redmayne as an actor are perfect in this movie for telling this new story, and crucially, once again, not being a chosen one. He's simply an author who we've heard of from the Harry Potter universe, and now we're seeing his adventure. The third major positive is the setting of this movie. 1926 New York is New York on the rise. It is New York moving beyond its, I suppose, its potential as simply a mass of humanity, as a collection of slums, and moving towards an industrious, outward-looking, world-famous city. And in so many ways, putting this story in that time and place is superb. It's essentially the same sort of time and place and setting as the King Kong movie, and so therefore actually there's a really good parallel between setting beasts loose out of a suitcase in New York and setting King Kong loose in New York. The thematically it works for the city as a long repeated motif of that era, but also actually just in terms of just the excitement, the buzz in New York at the time, that is in this film, and it's very, very welcome. We're actually seeing a world, but I'll come back to that in a moment, but a world which isn't a community, a one coherent community. This is a society, and that's really cool. The fact that we have in this society for example, things like the temperance movement, which is played on so cleverly with this sort of Harry Potter wizarding world spin. We have essentially a movement which is against witches and wizards, and even though this is but to muggles or no mages, this will be seen as a bit of a fringe thing. The fact that we understand that actually that this temperance movement has is onto something. There are actually witches and wizards out there. Adds power to it, and adds an extra dimension to what was a real series of events. Things like temperance movements, like the abolition of alcohol, this kind of thing. It's again thematically on point, and that's really very welcome. It's really great seeing MACUSA, the Magical Congress of the United States of America, I think it is, and how they work within New York, and in that sense as well, how they interact with, I suppose, with society and with the rules of how magicians, how wizards and magic folk are living in America. And in that sense, once again, we come back to this contrast between the UK and the US that Eddie Redmayne's Newt Scamander is observing. There are some obvious parallels, for example, with race relations, African Americans and their struggle in terms of civil rights. But also the fact that these two communities are handled in such a different way in the US. That is to say, magic folk cannot marry no mages, whereas in the UK, magic folk were marrying muggles, and hence the mudblood problem. It adds actually adds back into the Harry Potter world an extra dimension to this idea of mudblood. The fact that actually in the US there's apparently an attempt to keep that from happening by law. It's a powerful thing, and the MACUSA and the structure, Madam President, and all the way down this sort of essentially this magical FBI, and especially also their building is it's a welcome and enriching factor, which hasn't come from a book, so you're not comparing it to anything, and again makes this possibly the best of the films. Point number 4 is the fact that in this movie we get a Muggle perspective, we get a no-mage perspective on the wizarding world. To a certain extent, yes, the original Harry Potter films did this anyway. We sort of saw Harry Potter's love and amazement at magic throughout the movies, all the way, up to I don't know. I suppose even the penultimate film, we have this sense of when he sees something that is new and different than he hasn't seen before. But he's still nonetheless in that world. We're not getting. He's increasingly familiar with it. Whereas in this movie, we get literally a man off the street walking in and seeing a whole sphere of existence that he hadn't previously known existed. Dan Fogler, the actor playing the character Kowalski, as a sort of sidekick slash tag-along slash friend of Newt, is magnificent. And again, I'm not going to spoil any elements of the story here, but it is a perspective which is very welcome, and he walks such a fine line between being possibly annoying, because you're just going, okay, we get it, you're amazed, and being dependent on the wizards, and also being actually a proactive agent in this story. He he's a perfect balance of attributes, and I very much enjoyed it. Again, a Muggle perspective on the Wizarding World, a No-Maj perspective, is very welcome. And the final thing that I think makes this the best of the Harry Potter film franchise or universe is the fact that this is a movie that's set in the world. I sort of touched on this with my other points, but to expand, I suppose it's worthwhile saying that this puts magic into the context of No-Maj or Muggle society. It puts magic into the context of, for example, transatlantic travel. You know, he's still getting a ship to cross the Atlantic, kind of thing. It puts magic into the context of the Great War. We learn what Newt was doing during the Great War. Again, no spoilers. We learn what his older brother, or rather, it's hinted what his older brother was to people because of the Great War. We get the context of animals in the world, and how actually people are reacting to magical animals, not only as they're set loose in New York, but also actually on a global scale. This is part of Newt's whole driving character traits, really. His passion in life is to rehabilitate how people perceive magical creatures, and you know, the need to possibly eradicate them. And we see some of this through the different species that he has in his suitcase, and the way that he treats them. Again, I don't want to spoil any particular scenes in this film, but there's something magnificent about how he transports these animals. It puts everything we heard about in Harry Potter, everything we heard about in Hogwarts, into a scale and a scope and into a global sort of context that we simply haven't had previously. This film does such a great job of actually taking us out of the classroom, I suppose is what I'm getting at, in terms of politics, in terms of society, in terms of food, in terms of drink, things like giggle water instead of whiskey or vodka or something, in terms of the creatures, in terms of practical aspects of delivering, magical, or delivering on magical theory, as it were. You know, how do you actually achieve this goal in the real world? It takes us out of the classroom, and that's something which I was ready for, not only because obviously I'm an adult, but also as a Harry Potter fan. You know, I wanted to get out there and see the world, and in many ways, going back in time is a great way to do that as well, because it means that we're not going to butt heads with Harry Potter as an older man going around doing his dark wizard hunting. This film does that so beautifully and so elegantly and so well that I imagine for many people actually the opening up the world of Harry Potter into the world is going to be so liberating for cosplay and for the imagination. And I really look forward to seeing where this story goes over the course of the next 4 movies. So, you know, obviously it's not the best of the books, because it's not a book really, and I love the Harry Potter books, and indeed I love the Harry Potter films for what they are, but this movie is probably the best movie. It's not trying to set anything up, it's not trying to deliver on a book, it's not trying to lay obvious breadcrumbs for something later on. There is an obvious breadcrumb in this movie in the shape of a necklace or a symbol. Again, no specific spoilers, but it's not trying to serve all these masters that have to come round and fit in with a book releasing schedule and so on and so forth. That's why I think this is probably the best, the freest, and has the potential to become part of the most well-rounded filmic element of the Harry Potter universe. And I very much enjoyed it. I went to see it with this film with a huge Harry Potter fan, a friend from San Francisco. So I just got the song in my head, "If You're Going," and she agreed. She actually came out and she was saying pretty much the same thing. This is probably her favourite film. Doesn't mean that it's her favourite Harry Potter thing. There are books, again, which she probably loves more, but this is her favourite film of the whole Harry Potter, Warner Brothers, J.K. Rowling adventure. So anyway guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I've quite enjoyed thinking about this one actually, because I knew that I loved the movie, but I really wanted just to have a bit of a think about it and give you some reasons, proper reasons for it, and hopefully you have agreed with some of them at least, possibly. But at the very least, what I can say is that the film is well worth a watch. If you haven't seen it yet, of course you have though if you're a Harry Potter fan, but if you haven't, do go and check it out. I intend to go and see it at least one more time in the cinema before it disappears. Speaking of disappearing, this is probably a good time for me to end the video. Until next time, do take care. Bye bye.